wrestler can, on an off night, have a bad match. Whether the chemistry with their opponent is just not there, or they're carrying an injury, or they're either hungover or still drunk from the night before, it's not too terribly uncommon to see even the all-time greats produce a dud every now and then. Terrible wrestlers often tend to bring their opponents to their level, and getting a good match out of one, even for someone committed and with the ability to do so, can be a tough ask. Every now and then though, a wrestler who would usually be considered a write-off comes up with the goods and somehow puts on a match not just passable or watchable, but actively good. They may be helped tremendously by their dance partner, the crowd, or a favourable stipulation, but the fact is they managed to fight against their own shortcomings to do it. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 great wrestling matches featuring terrible wrestlers. Join us! Number 10, Virgil vs Ted Dibiase at SummerSlam 1991. Obviously, this entry is not about Ted Dibiase, a noted great worker who could have easily been WWE champion had he been a few inches taller, had pinker skin, and a Fu Manchu moustache. No, this one is about Virgil, all-round hustler and vampire of the gimmick table. Dibiase's bodyguard/servant had always been in his employer's shadow until one humiliation too many forced him to turn on the $1 Million Man. A grudge match at WrestleMania 7 was a washout, but the second go-around at SummerSlam was probably Virgil's best match ever, because Virgil, to that point, had worked mainly as enhancement talent or in tags with Ted, who typically carried the load for his team. In the storyline, Virgil was being trained by Roddy Piper, and behind the scenes, it wouldn't surprise me if the rowdy one gave his protege 1 or 2 actual pointers, because this was fantastic, with Virgil keeping up with Dibiase for a full 13 minutes with the $1 Million Championship on the line. Dibiase held everything together and worked his $1 Million arse off, but Virgil more than played his part, with the match helped massively by a red-hot MSG crowd. Sherry was ejected from ringside and the referee was knocked down, an exposed turnbuckle backfiring on Ted and giving Virgil a very popular victory that has kept him selling 8x10s ever since. Number 9, Ricky Steamboat vs the Honky Tonk Man on Primetime Wrestling. Once again, no prizes for guessing who the focus of this entry is. Ricky Steamboat, of course, could probably get a good match out of an uncooperative bear. While the Honky Tonk Man was definitely more of a character, his bouts not exactly noted for their high drama or technical mastery. In fact, his most famous match ever was losing to the Ultimate Warrior in 30 seconds at SummerSlam 1988. Paired with the Dragon for an Intercontinental title lumberjack match on the February 1st, 1988 episode of Primetime Wrestling though, Wayne Ferris proved that he was more than a dime store Elvis. Once again, this match took place in the world's most famous arena, and the crowd was very receptive to the action, which helped an already good match seem that much better. The longest reigning IC champion of all time bumped around willingly in the 15-minute affair, not content relying on the stalling and rest holds that was so commonplace in most of his matches. Now, the Honky Tonk Man is a warranted WWE Hall of Famer, and it could be argued the strength of his character and the heat he was able to generate meant that he didn't have to do much in the ring, but it was refreshing to see him break a sweat here. Number 8, Ahmed Johnson, Shawn Michaels and Sid vs Owen Hart, British Bulldog and Vader at In Your House International Incident. Hey, 2 bad wrestlers for the price of 1 here, with the fabulous foursome of Shawn Michaels, Owen Hart, British Bulldog and Vader being joined by the terrible twosome of Psycho Sid and Ahmed Johnson for this blinding 6-man from In Your House International Incident. Another chapter in the eternal America vs the World storyline. Team USA was supposed to feature Ultimate Warrior, but he, true to form, flaked out the week before, and so we got the Master and Ruler of the Universe instead. Not that Warrior was missed, or that Sid didn't do a commendable job stepping in, because even though this was, at times, the Shawn show, everybody played their part and came out of the match better than they did going in. The crowd were very into it all, and Camp Cornette were ready and willing to throw themselves about, while also doing a superb job of beating their opponents down and building heat. And this was a long match, clocking in at just a shade under 25 minutes, though the time absolutely flies by. And if you're not entranced by the first-class action, I guarantee you will not be able to keep your eyes off the tiny red trunk sported by the Pearl River powerhouse. Number 7, Christian vs Ezekiel Jackson at Royal Rumble 2010. When you think of great ECW champions of the past, you're likely going to flash to Raven, Taz, Rob Van Dam, Vince McMahon, you know, the legends. You're probably not going to land on Ezekiel Jackson, because you probably don't remember much about him, let alone the fact that he was actually the last ever title holder. But going into this ECW title match with Christian at the 2010 Royal Rumble, Big Zeke was the challenger. Captain Charisma was the right person to pair with the green musclehead because he ensured that the match was not only competent, but actually quite captivating by pacing it out and playing tackling dummy like a pro. Jackson got to show off his power and strength and displayed a real intensity on the big stage, while Christian elicited sympathy and smartly peppered in his comebacks. The result was that the crowd were really into it by the end, believing that the rock-solid rookie could potentially upset the wily veteran. Christian pulled through and got the win for his peeps, but Jackson was the real winner here, as he looked better than he ever had before in his short career. And clearly impressed by what they saw, WWE transferred the belt to him just a couple of weeks later. Number 6, Arn Anderson and Ric Flair versus Steve McMichael and Kevin Green at the Great American Bash 96. When athletes from other sports enter the world of wrestling, it's not a given that their natural abilities will translate and lead to success in the squared circle. Just because they can run fast or throw a ball far doesn't mean they're going to get the business. WCW weren't shy about utilizing real sports stars, famously using basketballers Dennis Rodman and Karl Malone to great effect. A couple of years before that press-getting stunt, however, WCW had Steve McMichael, a commentator who became a full-time in-ring performer, and Kevin Green, a fellow NFL standout. The Chicago Bear and Carolina Panther made their debut at the 1996 Great American Bash, teaming up to take on Arn Anderson and Ric Flair. What could have been a recipe for disaster actually turned out to be a terrifically entertaining 20-minute belter. Yes, 20 whole minutes. That is a long time for anyone to be out there, but the Egg Ball elites were walked through it all by the two consummate ring generals, and the crowd went nuts for it. Add in the shenanigans with Randy Savage, Bobby Heenan, and the quartet of valets at ringside, and this was just pure sports entertainment fun. The finish was great too, that treacherous Mongo turning on his partner and revealing himself as the Fourth Horseman. A prestigious role, but as far as match quality was concerned, it was all downhill from there. Number 5, WLC on the Extreme Rules 2014 kickoff show. I would like to start this entry by saying that it was an absolute insult putting WLC on the Extreme Rules 2014 pre-show when, by any measure, this 5-star classic should have been closing out the main show. And in case you didn't know it, this entry is about Hornswoggle, who may have been a memorable character at the center of one or two outlandish moments, but let's face it, never had a great match until he encountered this Mexican mini. El Torito had been tearing it up south of the border and showed the WWE Universe exactly what he could do here, assembling an absolutely outrageous car crash match with the three-man band's mascots. Things got off to a wonderfully surreal start with the introduction of the scaled-down ring announcer, referee and commentators Micro Cole, JB Elf, and Jerry Smaller, and it just went on from there. Neither man was afraid to put their bodies on the line for the cause as they balanced the humor with some genuinely startling stunts and bumps. Heath Slater, Jinder Mahal, Drew McIntyre, and Los Matadores got in on the act as well, each one taking their licks with gusto. The Little Bull got the W, but Swoggle must have been thrilled at getting to show off another side of his act. Number 4, Junkyard Dog and Hulk Hogan versus Terry and Hoss Funk on Saturday night's main event. Sylvester Ritter sort of proved the rule that you don't have to have a great deal of wrestling nous to be a big star in the business. The Junkyard Dog got over and became a huge draw in the main thanks to his charisma, personality, and promo ability, while regularly stinking it up whenever he was tasked with wrestling for more than a few minutes. Mid-South Wrestling promoter Bill Watts recognized this, keeping JYD in short matches in an effort to conceal his weaknesses between the ropes. When the Dog went to WWE, his physical condition and talent began to slide, and he was routinely involved in the worst match on the card. Except, that is, on the May 3rd, 1986 episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, when he teamed with Hulk Hogan to face Terry and Hoss, Dory Jr. Funk, in a spirited tag match that brought the house down. Held together by the brothers from Texas, the babyface side still put in a shift, and while by no means a classic or anything, it's a good watch and probably the best Ritter ever looked in his time at Titan. And the Funks actually got the win when, just kidding, leg drop, 1, 2, 3, dancing, posing, and see you next week, kids. Don't forget to take those vitamins. Bye! Number 3, John Cena versus the Great Khali at One Night Stand 2007. He may be the king of social media, but the Great Khali is, quite simply, one of the crappiest wrestlers ever. And he's certainly one of the crappiest wrestlers to ever be World Heavyweight Champion and main event pay-per-views. Uncoordinated and practically immobile, Khali had ugly matches with the likes of Undertaker, Kane and Batista, but managed to not fall over his own feet long enough to put together a miraculously good match with John Cena. Having already proved that they could have a passable one at Judgment Day 2007, they followed it with a really entertaining scrap at One Night Stand just a few weeks later. Thanks to Cena's willingness to get his head kicked in and helped by the Falls Count Anywhere rules, the match was a worthy way to close out the event. The Punjabi Playboy dominated throughout, throwing Cena around the ring with ease before the action spilled into the crowd and up onto the side stage, where Big Match John rose above 7 feet and 1 inch of hate, dropping the Giant with a monstrous FU off the side of it. For anyone who claims that there are no decent Great Khali singles matches out there, I direct you to this one. With caution, of course. I mean, don't go in expecting Steve Austin or anything. Number 2, Beulah McGillicuddy versus Bill Alfonso at ECW As Good As It Gets. An untrained referee and an untrained valet having a match on an ECW show in Philadelphia? What could possibly go wrong? Bill Alfonso was a referee cum manager known for his rambling promos and punch-on for whistleblowing, while Beulah was the beautiful wife of Tommy Dreamer, her physical involvement usually limited to a token catfight or perhaps one move here or there. Their match at the Good As It Gets event started as a mixed tag with Dreamer and Rob Van Dam also involved, but that ended in a no contest and turned into a singles match. It could have been a disaster, but actually turned out to be rather gripping, with not too much finesse but a lot of heart on display. And a lot of blood. Lots and lots of blood. Probably too much, to be honest. Fonzie sprung a gusher and ended up taking the fall after 7 minutes of wild and shockingly good action, which helped to enhance the reputation of both performers. It was revealed during the Rise and Fall of ECW documentary that Fonzie may have had a good reason to be putting in the effort, as Heyman basically told him this was his last chance after it was revealed that he'd been caught feeding information about wrestler contracts to rival promotions. The ECW head honcho also called this perhaps his favourite ECW match ever, considering the circumstances. Number 1, Bret Hart versus Tom Magee. Like Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Shawn Michaels, and some others who have made an appearance on this list, Bret Hart is a performer who can have a good match with just about anyone. One of the greatest to ever lace up a pair of boots, the Hitman had the ability to take an opponent of average or below average talent and make them look like a world beater. And that was often to his own detriment, as the unselfish excellence of execution sometimes did such a good job of carrying his foes that they ended up looking even more impressive than he did in the process. Which is what happened when Hart took a good-looking novice with a cartoon character physique named Tom Magee and had him looking so special that Vince McMahon felt as though he had found the next Hulk Hogan. Magee, a Canadian bodybuilder trained by Bret's dad Stu, had by far the best match of his otherwise undistinguished career prior to a television taping on October 7th, 1986. The mythical match was previously thought to be lost until it was rediscovered and subsequently put on the WWE Network in 2019. Though it had no way of living up to the immense hype, it's certainly a nifty match, and you can see why WWE officials were so hopeful for the high-flying Mega Man after it.